So, a question. Um, Scott, it's impossible not to be myself. In other words, my true self being awareness, everything arises and falls to that. There's no way that I can't be myself. So, your talk about authentic self just doesn't make any sense. There's no way to not be myself. That's good. Like, I have to give you kudos for that. That's good. It's also a bamboozle. Hopefully, I can explain it why, but that's good. The mind is clever. That is one of many pointers that have been usurped or used by the ego to continue suppressing, repressing emotion. Pointers like that, in my view, that say, I can't not be myself. See, that's a really good pointer to presence, actually. Everything is you. So here's a big feeling you don't want to feel. Can you let that be? Yep. Here's a few thoughts that are very disturbing or intrusive. Can we just rest and let those be? Rest as the awareness to which they're happening. Yes. Same with that thought, that feeling. Rest, let that be. Everything coming and going to the awareness. So the pointer that says, it's all you, allow it all, is where that's coming from, right? I can't not be myself. It's all me. Okay, it's a good pointer to awareness. It's not a great pointer for the embodiment of that, in my view. So it's a good pointer to awareness because it's showing you that things are coming and going to awareness, but awareness doesn't come and go. And everything, at least that's what they say, everything is like that, which is not true. That everything arises to awareness. No, it doesn't. But we're told that in certain circles. It's a good pointer for that purpose, to recognize the awareness to which everything comes and goes. Everything. Sorry for the quotes. But it's not a great pointer for embodiment because it helps to hold back repression. Why? Because when you believe that, and that's the mind then. So if the mind says everything is allowed, it's impossible not to be myself. Everything that arises is me, is an arising to awareness, me, awareness. It sounds really good, but in our actual experience, how repression works is that it's like having a little guy, I say, on our shoulder that says, okay, I'm not going to feel anger. Don't worry about that. We're going to feel some sadness, but not all of it. Shame, we're just going to hide the shit out of that. You don't have to worry about that. It's controlling your emotional experience constantly. The trauma is. So when we say it's all me, that's not how the nervous system sees that or opens to that at all. The system has a very strong agenda to allow some things and not allow other things. So when you say, isn't it all me? It's already happening. In the absolute sense, yeah, including if you're repressing anger, then you're just being yourself. Like you say, in the absolute sense. And that takes a lot of the pressure off to just be on one hand, right? Even if I'm holding anger back, I'm still being myself. I'm showing up exactly what is authentic for me in that moment. It's not safe to feel anger, so I don't. That's authentic. True. But you guys, we can't keep hanging our hat on stuff like that because that becomes the way of the bypass. At a certain point, we start using it to avoid certain things that we don't want to feel. So no, we're not being ourselves all the time. The false self is structured such in a way that a lot of stuff is filtered out. We're avoiding a lot of stuff. So point blank, because there is repression, we're not allowing all parts of ourselves. So it's not really true in your experience to say, isn't it all me? It is, but that's a way of hiding because the anger back here is also you. The sadness that you've buried is also you. But to just say that the repression of that is me, and that's authentic if I'm repressing that, it doesn't get to the actual feeling of that emotion. See, that's also you, that emotion. The actual energy of the emotion is a part of your experience too, not just the repression of it. So yeah, you don't want to use that kind of non-dual language just to reinforce the repression. What would be a different way to talk that wouldn't be so bypassy around that? Well, I say it this way. Everything arises and falls to awareness. Everything that does arise, some things don't, allow all of that. Then there would be certain things that are not allowed. Those are the repressions. Reverse that, those repressions. It's pretty simple, actually. May not be easy all the time, but it's pretty simple. And stop using those kinds of pointers that say, it's all me, because in reality, that's not what's going on, right? You're not literally opening to everything. It's not all you. There's certain things you're not opening to. So that pointer might be a way that you bamboozle yourself, continuing to repress something by saying it's all me. It's amazing, the mind, how it does that. No, we're not always just being ourselves. Being ourselves heals disease. That's Gabor Mate. That's also the science. So you don't want to sell yourself short in the healing of disease by using non-dual pointers that hide the repression from you that you want to reverse in order to heal disease. See that? So I think that these terms and these things are really, really important, actually, to have a better understanding of, so that we can get into the business of healing and not just awakening. I don't know that I'll be able to recap everything that I say, but it is nice sometimes to recap. I've only talked about one thing so far, which is be careful with the pointers like it's all already me. It's all already, I can't not be myself. That very clever pointer that's going around as a rebuttal to the embodiment work. People are saying things like that. It's impossible not to be yourself. No, it's actually very possible to hide emotions from awareness. Okay. Speaking about authenticity, I think I need to put some makeup on and not do it alone, because this is my spiritual practice. Authenticity, where do I go next? Using it as a weapon would be a good another topic. We might have really good intentions and still be using something as a weapon. I think I had good intentions. Let me say it this way. When I did this thing that I'm about to explain to you, my intentions felt like they were good, but I was very unconscious. So even though my intentions were good, my behavior resulted in a bunch of shit sometimes, to be honest with you. The unconsciousness can result in a bunch of shit happening. So I've been in relationships in which let's see, do I want to talk about this next? I think so. Yeah, I've been in relationships with people who repress sadness, and then I was an anger repressor during the relationship. So the weaponry would be very, again, good intentions, seemingly. In a dispute, I would be like, babe, can you please open to the sadness and the anger, or excuse me, the sadness and the hurt and the woundedness. All you're giving me is anger. You know, it sounds like really clear and really loving and inviting. But I wasn't going to the anger repression. No way. So I was asking my partners to go to the emotion that was mostly repressed for them, like it was terrifying for them, so that they could come into vulnerability with me. But I wasn't willing to go to my own repression of anger to come into the vulnerability for them. Okay, so I have to say this every time I talk about this. This is a hard one for some of us, but for those of us who repress anger, we don't open to vulnerability by going to the vulnerable emotions like sadness or hurt, if those emotions are in fact not repressed, like anger. By going to those emotions, we're staying safe in a dispute. We're not processing the trauma. We're staying safe, and then probably a lot of shadow boxing from that. So when I would do that to my partners, think about how unsafe that was, or unfair. It's like, hi, babe, I'm not going to go to my anger because it's not safe. I'm going to go to sadness and hurt because that's safer for me. I want you to go to sadness and hurt, even though it's terrifying for you. Don't go to anger because it's terrifying for me when you go to anger, because I repress anger. So every time you go to anger, even though it's safer for you, I'm going to be triggered. And I'm going to want you to go to sadness, even though it's terrifying for you. And I'm not going to the terrifying anger. And no wonder we're not doing really well. In a couple of relationships in the past, this was the issue right here, this ignorance. So using authenticity as a weapon, I can't even imagine how that turns out well. But, as I've said before, people will email me and they'll say, Scott, you're talking about anger. You need to talk about woundedness and hurt and be more vulnerable. I'm like, that's a shadow. And by the way, one person who said that to me, it's like they were so triggered by me that I couldn't even help them with it. So they just left in their bamboozled state and probably still repressing anger or whatever it was, because they couldn't see that they were shadowing. They couldn't see. It's the same thing that I couldn't see. People who express the emotion that you repress are threatening. People who talk about the emotion that you repress can be threatening. So when I talk about opening to anger, it could be threatening to a lot of anger repressors out there. But then what they'll do is they'll do to me what they probably do to their partner and what I did to some of my partners. You need to be more vulnerable. You need to be more sad. Stop talking about anger. Let me give it to you point blank. This is direct experience. Before I reverse the repression, try it with me. Bring up your family of origin and your spouse or whoever else. You don't have to get quiet here because you're holding emotion back from childhood. It's right here. We can access it. What I want you to say is, I can be vulnerable with them. Say it a few times and just feel the energy that seems to say no in the body. I just want you to feel that. I can be vulnerable with them, meaning I can feel and express my emotions. You could say honestly to them. That energy of no is the unprocessed emotion from childhood. That's the repression right there. So the reason that you can't be vulnerable is energetic. It's emotional. It doesn't really hear, although there's definitely conditioning around it. What I mean is it's emotional. So let's see, how do I say this? This energy in the inner body, if you went into third dimension KI, what you would find is you would discover your primary repression. So that's the feeling or feelings or traits about yourself that you repress the most because they're most unsafe. And once you find that and you do work in the primary repression, you're going to transmute and dissolve that energy right there. That's the repression. And then when you come back to that inquiry, I can be vulnerable with people. It'll be a yes. Now, How do we get there? For those of us who repress anger, we have to reverse the anger repression, because that's what you're storing in your body. So when you're in a dispute with somebody, like in a partner, and you're saying, we need to be more vulnerable, you're not going to get there unless you go to the anger, because the anger is the lack of vulnerability in your body. So that's what I mean. Don't use it as a weapon, because your work is your work to do on your side. The moment we start talking about somebody else, chances of that being a shadow are really strong. Whenever we're talking about authenticity, remember the chances of being a shadow are much stronger, because the inauthenticity is repression. So we're hiding that from ourselves, and it's just so easy to shadow that out to somebody else, to hide it from ourselves. So I can't see how, again, it's going to go well by talking about how other people are authentic or not. I don't see how that's going to end well for anybody, unless you just let it happen so that the unconsciousness there becomes a doorway into some scene, the shadow of that. Yes, authenticity. I'm going to try blush on my lower cheeks now. I don't know about this. Auntie Envy has makeup on her lower cheeks. Did you notice that? That filter that I use? Mm, it's just okay. Usually people are looking for praise, not usually, but often with your false self that you present to the world or whatever. If you notice, like, we're looking for attention or approval or praise for that self, but we don't want any attention on the repression at all. So we're not putting any attention on the repression, and we don't want anybody else to. We want everybody else to pay attention to the self that we show to the world, which is our false self. And this is just another way of talking about authenticity. So when we're operating from that false self, it's about love, attention, and approval, right? Mom and dad stuff. But when you're coming from authentic self, it's not about love, attention, and approval. And that's one of the markers, I think, one of the barometers or the gauges for this is well, one of the barometers is you don't think about what other people think, the approval, attention, love. Your consciousness isn't even going there really after reversing repression. It just doesn't go there. That's a big change for many of us. And the reason that it doesn't go there is because the false self is being made toast in that. The false self seeks love, attention, approval, acknowledgement. So those of you in an awakening process, you're probably seeing that false self kind of falling away. Therefore, the need for approval, attention, and not acknowledgement seems to be going away also. However, repression is also for approval, acknowledgement, attention, and it's a subtler thing sometimes. Like, it's one thing to like be making a big loud noise to try to get approval from people. Repression can be much more subtle than that. Like, it's just how you're showing up with people, how you're responding, your body language, your words, what you say or what you don't say, is infused by the repression. So as you start to see the false self is empty, your movements in the world are still coming from the repression. You can't see the false self, but your real authentic expression isn't online yet. And this is kind of a weird place that people get into. I call it spiritual inertia. But when it comes to authenticity, people are waking up out of the false self, but they're not able to move. Many people, they can't be themselves yet. They can't just go out and do that, even though they might want to, because it's not just about seeing through the false self. That's what I'm saying. It has to be embodied. The false self will just give you kind of like the end of seeking in the world for approval, attention, and love. It kind of just puts that to rest mostly, or a lot of it. But it doesn't necessarily bring your enthusiasm and inspiration online. It doesn't bring necessarily authenticity online just to put to rest the false self, because that authenticity comes from reversing the repression. So I think people think that they're being authentic because they don't experience much of a deficiency story. And there is more authenticity there, I'm sure. But it's not just about seeing through the false self is what I mean. What comes to take its place would be your authenticity. It's not just pure presence. We're not just pure space. There's appearance here. So how that appearance shows up would be different after reversing the repression, but that wouldn't be ego unless you're identified with it. So talk about this. Anger repression, for example, people are worried that if they reverse the anger repression, they're going to be angry all the time. Like they're going to land there. I'm an angry person. But that's a misunderstanding of like ego versus authenticity. So you're talking about fear of being identified with anger. Well, you're already identified with anger. It's just buried. So the thing that you're worried about is already going on. You're already identified with the anger that you've buried it. So your fear that you're going to be an angry person comes maybe from not really understanding what we're doing here. As you reverse the repression of anger and you allow it, we'll show you how not to identify with it, to fully allow it in awareness so you don't land on, I'm an angry person. And then that ends up being authentic. It wouldn't really be authentic if you just landed on, I'm angry. I mean, yeah, everything's authentic. Whatever arises is what rises. But to land on a new identification is not the point of KI. To say, okay, now I'm an angry person. The transformation here is not becoming angry people or becoming a, boy, girl, as if that's really what I am. It's the finally of allowing that so that the false self can fully dissolve. It's part of the reason. And now I can see that like there's this place that people are getting into that's funky. And it's like, it's this place between the awakening and the embodiment, where the embodiment hasn't happened yet. And a lot of times they don't have anybody talking to them in that state either. And so they're seeing like the false self falling away, but they might not be on board with the authenticity conversation yet because they're still repressing. And they might even think that just by seeing the emptiness of the false self, the rest is just going to come online. But people are in this weird, funky place. I can see it out there where it's like, okay, I'm seeing through the false self, but where's the juice? Like, where's my joy? Where's the real transformation in my life and in my relationships? And they're just looking around going, what happened? because the way that it was presented in the teachings, a lot of them, it's not actually showing up that way for me. That's what many people are saying. And they're kind of like in that no man's land where they can't move because they have inertia. They have repression of self. So they can't really move in the world. There's no flow, but they see that there's also no self there. Stuck, in other words. So authenticity, this conversation will be really, really helpful for those folks, I think. Because that's what's missing here for you. I'm just going to go out on the limb and say this is what we're looking for. But, we've said before that we're looking for presence, but who wants presence that's dissociated? Who wants that? I don't want it. So it's not just presence. Who wants presence with compulsions and addictions? I mean, can't do anything about it. If you have addiction, you have addiction. But that's not what we're talking about. Who wants that? Presence with trauma unresolved. Presence that's not embodied. We're not looking for that. But we might not know what we're looking for. We're looking for the embodiment of it because we're actually looking for ourselves. So authenticity is pointing to that sense of like fully being myself. It's totally experiential. It has nothing to do with the mind. But that's what we're looking for. So those people in no man's land, it's like they haven't found it yet. They've discovered the presence, but it's like it feels like something is missing. And a lot of them don't know what it is because the presence is recognized. So it's like, well, what could be missing? What's missing is the embodiment of that. That's what you're actually looking for.